Okay.
Welcome, Wargamers. This week we're going to be diving into the clan Pestilens, talking about who they are, what they want, the zealots that make up their ranks, ending with a talk about the army in terms of games and tactics. But to truly understand this faction, we need to build our understanding from the ground up. So the theme of this episode is going to be Skaven first, Pestilens second. When you look at the cover of this book, it's really easy to think that these are just Nergal rats. It makes sense, the keyword Nergal is even on their war scroll. But we're going to unpack this faction because there's a lot more going on here. The Skaven are one of the most original races that GW has come up with. Certainly one of the most characterful. These are the rat men of the mortal realms, a true infestation of reality itself. Their numbers are so vast that it would fill enemies with despair to even comprehend it. If they ever truly organized and were of one mind, they could wipe the realms clear. They have the manpower, which is the endless amounts of bodies, the technology, though crude as it is, but those things add to their advantage, so they could do it. So the question really becomes, why don't they? Fundamentally with Skaven, it's their nature that holds them back. Skaven are ambitious to a fault. They are conniving and backstabbing, petty and vengeful. Every one of them wants to be in charge, to feel superior, and to subjugate others. So rather than having that unified vision, they scheme against one another in this vast web of Skaven politics. And their technology to that end, while advanced, is very unreliable and crude. Some of their best war machines are more likely to blow up on them than they are the enemy. And their numbers, for that advantage, don't mean much because, frankly, they are as cowardly as they are numerous. Once they feel like defeat is inevitable, they cut and scurry away, often doling out petty punishments to losing leaders. And by their nature, because of these things, they'll never truly unify and conquer like they could. Now, one more thing as I'm talking about Skaven as a whole that I really want to address with this, because it's the only battle tome we have for Skaven, is their unique ability amongst all races, and that is called the NAW Holes. See, the setting of Age of Sigmar is, frankly, at least in its earliest incarnations, defined by realm gates. These are the only true means of back and forth travel from realm to realm, or even in the same realm just across vast distances. It's what makes civilization spreading, and then of course chaos spreading, even possible. These are immensely important strategic points for that exact reason. Well, Skaven have this unique ability that they can burrow through the ether itself. Like they can create for themselves a tunnel going from realm to realm, or real space to real space. A couple important things to know. When you walk through a realm gate, it is an instantaneous travel. You walk kind of like a doorway, in one side, out the other, pretty seamlessly. However, NAW holes don't operate like that. They are vast, large, long tunnel systems. What this means is there is a very real rat's den or warren in between the realms themselves, in that space. However, it does allow them to pop up pretty much anywhere, and so you might be asking yourself, well, that's the biggest strategic advantage of any faction, and it is certainly to be able to get your troops from one place to another. How come it doesn't culminate in their ultimate win? Well, the fact of the matter is, just like all their technology, NAW holes are unreliable. They are imprecise, often ending up far from their destination they intended to be, and they're just as likely to collapse in that kind of empty nothingness than they are to actually reach their destination. There's actually a short story in the Malign Portents narrative campaign that came out where they accidentally borrowed a NAW hole into the bottom of an ocean, and it drained the ocean, revealing the Edenith Deepkin inside, but of course it flooded the NAW hole, killing all the Skaven who were digging there. Between getting lost in reality itself as they gnaw through it, and the collapse and devastation that can cause, these wind up not being nearly as strong and powerful as you might think on surface level. And with their population being so massive and vast, the teeming masses of Skaven have managed to organize themselves in a few different ways, and generally we call these clans. There's Clan Verminus, Scryer, Eshin, etc. But of course today we're going to be focusing on Clan Pestilens. These are Skaven who are the most religious and devout servants of the Skaven god, the Great Horned Rat. It's a key emphasis to say that they are religious-minded, because most Skaven aren't, by virtue of how many there are, but these are the ones who interpret their relation to their deity as being a religious and holy one. The Great Horned Rat, during the events of the end times and moving into Age of Sigmar, ascended to the pantheon of chaos deities. Though the other gods, Khorne, Slaanesh, Tzeentch, Nergal, they loathe to acknowledge it, the Great Horned Rat plays his own role in the fates of the mortal realms. And how this religious fervor plays out sets Pestilens apart from other clans. With their unending hubris, all Skaven want to be the greatest in the realms, but most are happy to enslave other races. Things like Clan Verminus would just rather see humans as slaves, as long as they can dominate and be on top. But Pestilens really want all other races to be eradicated, which is different. It's a different goal to be on top versus to be the only one. They also want to see a corrupted world where only the faithful of the Great Horned Rat thrive. And yes, that eventually means they'll want to turn on the other Skaven clans, but that's going to happen later. So we understand that that's their religion. They want Great Horned Rat to be number one. They want anyone who's not worshipping him in spirit or deed to go away. That's understandable, but how do they express this zeal, this religious affection? How do they make that happen? And the answer is contagion, biological warfare, using living weapons of plague and disease to annihilate their enemies. And this is what makes them very Nergal-ish, if you will. And we'll explore that in just a moment. But for the moment, try and divorce the idea of disease as a weapon from Nergal. The rat's ability to carry plagues is a divine weapon in their eyes, to be used in wiping out non-Skaven and then later on competing clans. It will create a desolate world that only the faithful and the Great Horned Rat can thrive in. A true paradise where their god is supreme and they can be with him. To aid in their mission, the Great Horned Rat has given visions to his top priests, and these visions culminated in what we now know as the 13 Great Plagues. Each one is a new and horrific weapon to aid in their mission. And we'll talk more about these in tomorrow's video. They really deserve their own dedicated time because it's the core mission and drive for this faction. But today I want to focus on that relationship with Nergal, I said. And again, it's easy to see these as pure Nergal troops. As if at first glance you'd say, oh, Skaven defected from the Great Horned Rat and now worship Nergal. But in truth, they are solely devoted to the Great Horned Rat. They don't have any specific love of Nergal. It's the rise of the Great Horned Rat that they want. It's the Great Horned Rat who gave them their mission and their weapons to achieve it. So why the difference? Right, what is the fundamental difference between the Great Horned Rat using disease to destroy things and Nergal, even though Nergal gets empowered by the use of diseases and spread of decay and things like that? Well, the Battle Tome kind of gives us one little blurb, and I want to break it down a little bit. Nergal is a god of disease and pestilence. But he's also the god of rebirth. He loves the cycle of life. If a person dies, a million more lives enter the mortal realms in the form of bacteria and all these little things. He wants life abundantly. He sees his influence as gifts, and he loves his children, and he tends his garden. It is a dark kind of benevolence, I suppose. But the Great Horned Rat is not like that at all. Just like the Skaven, he is conniving, backstabbing, prideful, and spiteful. When the Great Horned Rat uses disease, it's as a weapon, not for the sake of rebirth, not for joy or gift-giving. He ultimately wants to create diseases that are so toxic, so destructive that it breaks the cycle of life. It is the kind of disease that sterilizes the realms, which is the antithesis of Nergal. Keep in mind that all of this, the using contagion weapons to get this done, this is just one aspect of the Great Horned Rat, because Scryer and Eshin and Verminus, they all revere different aspects of him. It's just that Clan Pestilens sees him as the Great Corruptor. Okay, so if Great Horned Rat and Nergal are different, why is Nergal on all of their war scrolls? Well, here's kind of the conundrum. Regardless of how the plagues and diseases are used, Nergal gains power whenever those things are spread. Here's the thing, just as Khorne is empowered by a Stormcast killing an Ironjaw, blood has been shed, a skull has been taken, but there's nothing chaosy about that interaction. It's the destruction versus order, right? It's an unintentional consequence. Giving Nergal power to spread diseases is an unintentional consequence of using this type of weapon, meaning bioweapons. Now, Nergal knows the Great Horned Rat wants him dead eventually and his children destroyed, but for right now they are tolerated. because they are efficient spreaders of disease, and for right now, it's enough for a Nergal. So that's why you'll see uneasy allies between Pestilens troops and Nergal units, because they can endure the toxicity that Nergal units bring. They're numerous and expendable, but they're not his children. Clan Pestilens are not Nergal's children, they belong to the Great Horned Rat. It's a cool book that explores the idea that something can empower and fuel a god while also not honoring them specifically. Again, think about the fact that every time somebody dies, blood is shed in anger and wrath in the mortal realms. It doesn't matter if chaos is involved. Khorne feels that and feeds off of it. The same thing here happens with Nergal. Anytime a biological weapon is used, disease is spread, even has nothing to do with chaos armies, Nergal still gets buffed from it. So to summarize this in a very succinct way, Clan Pestilens are utterly devoted to the Great Horned Rat. They want to see him ascendant and the rest of the realms brought to ruin. To do this, they use biological weapons as dictated by the Great Horned Rat himself. Using disease and plague inadvertently pleases Nergal, who does not claim the rats as his own children. Now, given enough time, these two forces will eventually clash, but for right now, they are allies of convenience. And as with all of my videos, I love to end talking about why is this cool. Well, first of all, this is our only Skaven battle tome. I think this faction adds so much flavor to the grand intellectual property that Games Workshop has put together, and it stuns me that we don't have more books for them. They are so characterful and fun to play. They have a cool mix of horde units and centerpiece models, not to mention painting immense amounts of detail, those rotting effects and weathering things and things like that. A lot of fun. And lore-wise, few factions have such a dichotomy when it comes to worship. I made it clear they don't worship Nergal, but no one argues what they do empowers him, which makes them a unique relationship on both ends. At what point, if everything goes Clan Pestilens' way, does Nergal kill Clan Pestilens because they've outlived their usefulness? If it goes the other direction, at what point does Clan Pestilens turn on Nergal? How do they fight that without giving him more power, more disease, more plague? So you have this kind of weird, stuck mutual relationship that they benefit from each other, but they don't want to benefit from each other. They want to be separate. But here's the thing about Skaven is that they are not a race that enjoys mutual relationships. Likewise, Nergal, even though he is kind and benevolent, we often picture him as being jolly, he does want to be this supreme chaos god. It's called the Great Game, all the chaos gods vying for ultimate authority and power. He wants to be number one. Don't let his jolliness fool you. He has ambition, and he doesn't want the Great Horned Rat around. But this faction of billions of rats has bound the two together, the Great Horned Rat and Nergal, for the foreseeable future. In this narrative of gods and demigods and such, this relationship is super unique and deeply fascinating. And it's part of what's drawn me to the army since its release. Now, in tomorrow's video, we're going to explore the Great Plagues, which is the real mission of Clan Pestilens, to see what they do and what happens when they're all combined. But until then, tell me your thoughts about the faction. Every video is the start of a dialogue. I want to hear your thoughts on Clan Pestilens, if you find their relationship with Nergal fascinating, and what you'd like to see them add to the Mortal Realms in the future. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll catch you in tomorrow's video. Happy wargaming. Hey Wargamers, thank you so much for watching that video. Be sure to hit subscribe and click the little bell notification icon so you're alerted to all new videos coming out.